Are you a tree-hugging hippie that also loves war crimes? Well, have I got the place for you. MIQUELLA'S Haligtree. This place represents the intersection of horticulture, arboriculture, and bioterrorism. The perfect trinity of Malenia and MIQUELLA'S ideals.
I like your cut, G.
And for a limited time, they are giving free vacation packages to lucky Make-A-Wish Foundation recipients. Now, how exactly do you get to this really large piece of wood? Well, you have to journey through a really snowy place. Be careful you don't get lost in the blizzard, because otherwise you will end up in the best From Software zone of all time. Eventually, you will find yourself at Ordina Liturgical Town. It's a town dedicated to the worship and defense of that good wood. However, it's completely abandoned, and you only find its true inhabitants when you transition the town to nighttime, just like any abandoned town in a flyover state. And naturally, the town is home to various colorful prowlers. Ordina Liturgical Town is also home to paraplegics, and they are really strong. These aren't the happy-go-lucky second-generation albinorics you find elsewhere. Those fun, lovable fellas who are just here to have fun and kill. These first-generation albinorics will strike you down with precision the likes of which has never been seen before on this earth. However, they are completely immobile, so you can just stab them in the back, which definitely feels a bit discriminatory. The goal of this zone is to give a light to someone at the bus stop. Once you have serviced all of the smokers, the secondhand smoke will overwhelm your senses and transport you back to the real world, where the way forward to the Haligtree is now open. You find yourself up on the branches of the Haligtree. This immediately sets a bad first impression of MIQUELLA'S crib, because it is literally just filled with piss guys. Like, okay, they are near the entrance of the tree, so maybe they don't live here. But at the same time, if you are having guests over to your house, you should make sure there are no piss guys. It's common courtesy. Surprisingly, there is also a giga piss guy here. He's not very nice. The first real part of the Haligtree that you traverse is what true Elden Ring fans refer to as the, Haligtree Town. This place is definitely a settlement. A different type of guy resides here, mouth guys. Here's a fascinating secret for you. Did you know that you can easily get away from this strong guy by jumping over this gap? Never mind, this entire zone is basically a massive tree house. It loops back on itself constantly, and there are multiple paths to the end, so it can be fairly easy to miss entire pathways while thinking that you have seen most of the stuff in the area. There are two traveling glintstone scholars towards the end of the zone. You get a long run up towards one of them, and it feels like something cool is about to happen. However, due to anime brain rot, they try and imitate Goku and you get a free backstab. The other is running a smash build, and it's quite effective. The boss of this zone is Loretta, Knight of the Haligtree. She is an albinoric and rides on her horse because she cannot walk. Loretta was stationed here to protect the Haligtree from people like us, so naturally we just brutally murder her. After this fight, you get hit with the classic, "Here is a great view of the place you are about to explore," and a really fun ladder. Once you cross a bridge, you will find yourself in a prayer room, so say your prayers, because this is where the real MIQUELLA'S Haligtree begins. This is an incredibly intricate zone. It features a large amount of verticality, so there are constantly platforms that you can jump down to, and stairs you can climb, along with a large amount of dark side rooms. Naturally, all this verticality will make you curious about what lays at the bottom. Nothing good. These guys are awful. They are toddlers and you have games on your phone. You cannot escape them no matter how hard you try. Do not make the mistake of leaving your runes deep in this pit of despair, because there are a whole horde of these guys, and they will not let you leave until they have purchased a bunch of gems in Clash of Clans using your credit card. Here is a fascinating secret for you. Did you know that you can see these landmines before you trip them? This is a completely useless mechanic that is only useful in hindsight, and I love it. Fortunately, once you escape this pit, you never have to return. Well, alright then. The first part of this zone ends in a fight before the Site of Grace. However, it's one of these fights where you look at it and think, yeah nah mate, and you try to run past it. I would be interested in knowing how many people actually tried to fight them normally on their first run through of the zone. The next part of the zone leads directly into the Haligtree. It's quite open and you can even see a certain arena at the bottom.
Blade of Miquella.
It is at this point you can see that the tree isn't really alive. It's been completely rotted out from the inside and left hollow. It now makes sense as to why the outer parts of the zone are referred to as braces, because the tree would die instantly without them and fall into the surrounding ocean. The Haligtree Knight Armor details how Miquella failed to grow this into a proper Erdtree, so the state of it makes sense. There are a bunch of weird white stuff guys here, but other than that there isn't much that happens here. Well, except for one thing, but we'll get to that later. After traveling through a drainage channel, you find yourself at the same place, but lower. When I first played through this area, I was expecting to find the boss after this Site of Grace, but it just keeps going. We did not need a church filled with the weird guys who shoot weird sticky stuff at you. We already have those in real life. In your panic, you can choose to run out of the church or further into it. If you go outside, you will find yourself right at the bottom of the Haligtree. This area is a lot more peaceful in comparison to the other hell pit from earlier. There is a tranquil graveyard where soldiers mourn the fallen. Naturally, you can place some flowers on the graves and provide a supportive shoulder for the soldiers to cry on. There is actually a fairly strong set of night enemies down here, which can provide a fun fight even if you have the power of New Game Plus on your side. However, there really isn't much else down here, which is probably a good thing considering what comes next. If you go back through the church, you will find an elevator, and down that elevator is that place. That place we all recognize. There isn't much down here other than the hallway, but if you turn left before the Site of Grace, you will find the site of Malenia's Scarlet Bloom. It's quite beautiful and surrounded by butterflies that you can eat. Beneath it you can find a set of traveler's clothes, which I assume are Malenia's. I bet that gets Malenia simps really excited. However, these cloves and Scarlet Bloom could potentially belong to someone else, but we'll talk about that later. There is an elevator here that takes you up to the tower where you can get the Miquella Knight Sword. The elevator is completely useless though, because when you go to climb the ladder to get to the top, you just get piss sniped by a big mamas like father like son. However, dying here isn't a big deal, because it's about to happen a lot more when you go down the hallway. When people say that Malenia is the Blade of Miquella, you should believe them, because she is.
I like your cut, G.
Her boss fight is crazy. She has a vast array of amazing attacks, and they are all really fun to dodge, which is great because you can only dodge them. As we all know, if she hits you, she heals. This might seem a bit video gamey, but it is actually referenced in the lore quite heavily. The narrative reason for why she heals when she hits you is that the developers of the game thought it would be funny. Malenia has one attack that is just the worst. Everyone knows what attack I am talking about. In the interest of not rehashing our shared trauma, I am not going to go over it. There is a time and a place for everything, but not now. The actual character of Malenia is not actually that tragic. I mean, it's a little bit prepare to cry, but she also did some awful stuff. Malenia and Miquella are the children of Radagon and Marika. They are also both Empyreans, which basically means they have the power to become a god on the level of Marika. Malenia and Miquella are also twins who were cursed at birth. Miquella would never age, while Malenia would be infested with scarlet rot. This is bad because scarlet rot is really annoying. However, despite all of this, for a while life was good. Malenia and Miquella got up to all sorts of zany escapades in the big city, which were covered in the 11-season-long sitcom called Me, Malenia and Miquella. However, this sitcom is lost media, so we can only speculate as to what events occurred within, and who the mysterious titular Kree character was. Eventually, the shattering occurred, which resulted in a massive war between the demigods as they fought over the Great Runes. This naturally led to a clash between Malenia and Radahn. Radahn is a really cool guy. His favorite musician is The Boss, and the only Wii game that he owns is Zack and Wiki Quest for Barbarossa's Treasure. He is also really good at fighting. As they fought, Radahn gained the upper hand, so Malenia threw a tantrum and activated her tactical nuke, which was the Scarlet Bloom. This is why Caelid is such an awful place, with all the scarlet rot and its twisted landscape. This girl boss move resulted in the deaths of many who resided in Caelid, along with rotting Radahn's body and mind, to the extent that he could no longer solve any of the delightful puzzles in Zack and Wiki Quest for Barbarossa's Treasure. Tragic stuff. Malenia was then rescued and taken back to the Haligtree so she could recover from her injuries. However, in her absence, her brother had been kidnapped. You see, Miquella was left unattended while Malenia fought Radahn, so Mohg just swooped in and kidnapped him. Mohg is a really creepy guy who was obsessed with Miquella. Because Miquella was an Empyrean, Mohg wanted to make Miquella a god like Marika and serve as his Elden Lord. Now this might seem a bit weird. How could Mohg just kidnap Miquella that easily? Well, there isn't really a nice way to say this. The Miquella Knight Sword states that it has yet to be offered to any knight, which is a roundabout way of saying that Miquella has no knights, and as a result, no friends. Now it makes sense as to why his sister is the Blade of Miquella. It's because he literally has no friends who he can give a free sword to. Unfortunately, this sad fact is canon. It's in the lore. So basically, Malenia nuked Caelid and left a child unattended. That's her entire character arc. In fact, that's the deal with Malenia. Now, we can't talk about Miquella's Haligtree without talking about Millicent. Millicent is that random amputee you find dying in an abandoned church. She will warn you away because she is infested with scarlet rot. However, fortunately for her, we are a representative of the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and we are here to make her wish come true. To begin this process, we first need to talk to some boomer in a swamp. If you go in through the front entrance, you can find a message he left, pointing you in his direction. However, Clifford the big head dog is in your path. It's fairly easy to sneak past him, but every time you return to this shack, the looming anxiety of a mauling will dominate your psyche. The guy sitting in the shack is called Gowry. He is the guardian of Millicent and contacted the Make-A-Wish Foundation on her behalf. Gowry says he will tell us the secret of Celia if we help him, but we aren't doing this for a reward. We do it for them kids. He tells us that Millicent wants to see the new Avengers film before it releases. The best we can do is Ant-Man, so naturally we journey into the swamp to contact someone who can leak it to us. However, Kevin Feige is already here and has murdered them, so we have no choice but to fight him for the Ant-Man MKV file. You can summon Millicent's sister for help, but it's not necessary with the power of New Game Plus. His fight isn't too bad. He summons a bunch of interns and shoots scarlet rot at you, but eventually he falls, and we can claim Ant-Man. Once we return to Gowry, he uses iTunes to transfer it onto an iPad that we can now give to Millicent. He also explains how he came to know Millicent. Gowry found her as a child in the swamp, and since then he has been caring for her. However, the true prepare to cry is that Millicent is unlikely to remember him because of the scarlet rot in her body. We return to Millicent and hand over the copy of Ant-Man. She watches it.
Well, that was easier than expected.
It literally puts her to sleep. Once you reload the area, you will see that she is alive and well. This is because the copy of Ant-Man is also a needle created by Miquella, which was used by Malenia to abate the symptoms of the scarlet rot. So by giving it to Millicent, it has somewhat cured her. She expresses her desire to travel and fulfill her destiny. The first part of her journey is visiting Gowry's shack. She expected to find someone here, but nobody came. This is really sad. If you reload reload the area, you will find that Millicent has left, and Gowry has returned. He offers to teach you some sorceries in thanks. One of them details a link between Celia and Nokron. Cool, I guess. We can tell him that Millicent came here. He hid from her intentionally in order to avoid getting between her and her destiny. He also drops a really hard line.
As I've aged, I found the best way to aid the young is to be forgotten.
I always found Millicent's next spot weird. It's at a place called Erdtree Gazing Hill. She stands quite far away from the site of grace and there are no real landmarks near her, so it's very easy to miss. You have to meet her here to continue her questline, but it's so far out of the way. I wouldn't be surprised if many people just did not continue her questline beyond this point. She tells us that the scarlet rot in her has stilled, while also pointing us towards Malenia and the Haligtree. Millicent also mentions how she could help us if she still had her arm, so naturally we have to go to the arms store and buy her an arm. The closest arms store in Altus Plateau is the Shaded Castle. It's run by the House Marai. They are a family of executioners who allied themselves with Malenia. According to the Marai robe, the sons of the house are born sickly. I wonder why. So they were naturally beguiled by Malenia, who happens to be infested with the worst disease in the lands between. If you look at the weapon wielded by the current head of the House Marai, it also details that he secretly followed the Scarlet Rot as a religion. Millicent's brand new arm can be found up on a wall, and guarded by a clean rot knight. The description of it states that the Lord of the Shaded Castle embraced the prothesis. For Millicent's sake, let's just hope that he did not embrace it too much. Climbing to the top of the castle is actually kind of fun, and the walkway to the boss fight looks kind of cool. The boss here is Elphael of the Briar. He is the bell-bearing hunter that you can fight at specific merchants. Elphael was going to be executed at this castle but captured it instead. He actually has a deep backstory, but it's a bit out of the scope of this video, so I'll probably talk about it in a separate video. Once you beat him, you can find this cringe message I left. Wow, maybe I was the true Game Awards all along. Now you can return to Millicent and lend her a hand. She can now aid us in battle, which is great. However, I may have already destroyed the bosses she can be summoned for, through the power of New Game Plus. Despite defeating this Lankster earlier, Millicent will still appear at the Windmill Village, sporting her new arm. All she does here is reiterate that she will help you in battle, and talk about her cool arm. Cool. The next place you find her is by the ancient Snow Valley Ruins Site of Grace. She is surprised to see us here, because these lands are forbidden. However, she likes us, so yet again, she tells us that she will help us in battle. We get it, Millicent. You are a nice person who is eager to help their friends. Stop rubbing it in our faces. We are grade A psychopaths who brutally backstab the sick and the weak. She also tells us how to reach the Haligtree through going to Castle Sol and getting the medallion. The boss fight here is basically Kevin Feige, but if he summoned more annoying enemies. They even have similar names. Once you beat him and get the medallion, you get a cool view of the Haligtree, as well as this ghost that complains about never being able to see the Haligtree, despite this view literally being right in front of him. After gaining access to the Haligtree, you can find Millicent in the prayer room. She reveals the purpose of her journey at this point. Millicent confirms that she is related to Malenia, and that she wants to return Malenia's will to resist the Scarlet Rot. The same will that she abandoned when she nuked Caelid. This sounds absolutely bizarre, but it will make sense eventually. In order to progress to the last stage of her quest, you need to go to this area just before the drainage channel site of Grace, and get lured in by a rare item. This so-called ulcerated tree spirit has a lot of health. The fight itself isn't too difficult, but man, this is such an awkward arena. Once you beat it, you can then find a summon sign, which will let you assist Millicent in a battle. However, you can also do something rather devious. If you travel back to Gowry, you will find him crying because he is a crybaby. He just kind of sits there until you talk to him. If you ask him why he is crying, he tells you that he is sad because Millicent is about to be killed by her sisters. Wow, that's heavy. I can understand why he is so sad. It's no easy thing outliving your own child. Gowry then immediately asks us to betray Millicent so that she can bloom into a flower.
I beg of you, kill her with your own 2 hands.
Well, okay then. If you return back to the Haligtree, you will see 2 summon signs. One to help Millicent and the other to betray. I chose to help Millicent because you get to kill 4 people instead of 1. I am truly a psychopath. The fight itself isn't too bad, but on New Game Plus I found it to be quite difficult. Fortunately, you can just keep retrying it, so it's not a big deal. Millicent will also use Waterfowl Dance. You know, that awful move Malenia uses, so it's nice to have the power of rage quitting on your side for once. Once Millicent carries you through the fight, you can find her on the other side of the arena. She seems to be ill. Matic. She also lies directly to our face.
Without your help, I could not have defeated that quartet.
Millicent removed the needle from her body, the same one that stopped the Scarlet Rot from killing her, and that contained a copy of Ant-Man. She did this because she would rather die as she is, instead of blooming. She says that she wants to die alone so we won't get sick from her body. Naturally, I fast traveled away, and immediately ran back to her dead body. You can touch her disease-ridden body that is literally radiating scarlet rot and take the needle from her. However, this time it is clean. There is now only one more thing left to do. You can return to Gowry. He is angry that Millicent defied his plans. This dialogue reveals that he is actually a Scarlet Rot stan, and because we are one of Millicent's shooters, we can plug him. It's interesting to note that if you plug him before this point in the questline, you can see that he is actually using a weird white stuff guide to communicate with you. But when we cap him this time, he just dies normally, so it's safe to assume
we got him.
The description of the needle hints that you can return it to Malenia, so if you use it on the bloom left behind after her boss fight, it will turn into MIQUELLA'S needle, which you can use to reverse the effects of frenzy, if you were on your way to get that ending. But there is actually a bit more to this act of giving the needle to Malenia. You see, Millicent is actually Malenia, or at least a part of her. When Malenia nuked Caelid and created that awful swamp, Millicent was a part of her that was left behind. So in a way, she is kind of Malenia's daughter, but also not entirely. Gowry was a member of the flock which worships the Scarlet Rot, and he took care of Millicent in the hope that she would one day bloom like Malenia did. It can also be assumed that Millicent's sisters are of a similar origin. In particular, we can say that Millicent might actually be a manifestation of Malenia's will to resist the Scarlet Rot. At the end of Millicent's questline, when we get the needle back, it no longer has the red patch on it and appears to be purified. And so when we use it on the bloom after Malenia's boss fight, we are in a way returning Malenia's will to her. It is also worth mentioning that the small bloom outside of Malenia's boss room could potentially belong to one of Millicent's sisters, as the clothing found beneath it is similar to Millicent's. There is also some cut content that potentially hints at a cut Malenia questline, and more specifically, that Millicent's questline might have been originally intended for an amnesiac Malenia. I'm not going to get too into it because it is cut content, but in a roundabout way it does inform the similarities between Malenia and Millicent, and also contextualizes why some aspects of her questline seem a bit symbolic, or even just plain unfinished. I guess there was a deal with Millicent and MIQUELLA'S Haligtree, and I guess I discussed it. Now at this point is where I would normally end the video, but From Software released a new PNG recently. This was to announce the upcoming DLC for Elden Ring, because they could tell lore guys on YouTube were fiending for that paycheck. The person in the image is MIQUELLA. You can tell because they have the same trim. Some people were saying that it might also be Marika, but she would not be caught dead with that trim. The big dog is obviously the one we ride throughout the game, but we can infer from the fact that some random kid stole our dog that the DLC me will probably take place in some kind of parallel world, potentially in the past or future. This is amazing because it is a first for From Software games. So far, every single other DLC has occurred in the exact same time and place as the main game. They were obviously inspired by Marvel here. You will also notice that there is an Erdtree and a shadow of it. Most people have already pointed out that the so-called shadow looks like Deathblight. Yeah, it kinda does, which means we will probably encounter Godwin in some form. The Erdtree in this image looks quite small compared to the base game one, and the field to me looks like an overgrown Altus Plateau with no Lanedale present, so that makes me think that maybe it could have taken place in the distant past. But on the other hand, when we find Miquella in the base game, he is kind of sleeping, and with all the ghostly graves present in the image, it could also potentially take place in some kind of dream, or afterlife related to whatever Miquella is going through in there. It is also worth mentioning that we don't actually know who owned Torrent before us, so potentially this could be a past version of Torrent that Miquella rides because they used to be the former owner, or alternatively Godwin could have been the former owner of Torrent. We don't really have enough information to say for certain who formerly owned Torrent, but I expect it will be resolved within this DLC, and it will either be Miquella or Godwin. Feel free to share your theories in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, you should subscribe to my channel. It would look great on your resume.